Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks to all these folks tuning in on Zoom as well. My name is Brian. I work for the North and South Rivers Watershed Association. We are the NSRWA. We're just a local nonprofit. Our office is in Norwell, but we do programs all throughout the South Shore. Our mission is to preserve and protect our most valuable natural resource, water. And through education and engagement programs just like this, we strive to ensure that there's healthy water for people, for the communities, for the environment, for nature, now and for the future. So just by tuning into these programs like this, you're supporting what we do, and we really appreciate you being here. So just a couple quick things. A huge shout out to our sponsors for this lecture series. Clean Harbors, as well as the Massachusetts Cultural Councils of Hingham, Marshfield, Scituate, Pembroke, Rockland, and Norwell. Thank you so much for your continued support of the Watershed and Mass Audubon's educational programs just like this. So if you've tuned into the WaterWatch lecture series before, you know that this is a fantastic, I think, nearly 40-year partnership between Mass Audubon and the North and South Rivers. So we are joined by Steve French with Mass Audubon. Steve, I can pass it over to you real quick.
Okay. Yes, I'm Steve French, and I'm a part-time person here at Mass Audubon, and I want to welcome everybody here to the sanctuary. This is great to see you all. And I'm also a volunteer for the watershed, so I'm bridging the gap between the two groups, but we work incredibly well together. We have common goals, and I'm looking forward to seeing the presentation tonight because the North River is the heart and soul of everything that, all of us here on the South Shore have come to know and love. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks for being here. And so thanks for all of you who are showing up here live. We really appreciate the flexibility of being able to switch venues. We outgrew our original venue, but we are really excited to be here at Mass Audubon's North River Sanctuary, just like last week, just like next week as well. And then thanks to, we've got about 55 people tuned in online right now. So thanks all of you for being out there and tuning in. So with that, are really excited. So last week we learned about the South River, and today we are going to be learning about another very special river, the North River. And with us today we have Lyle Nyberg, local South Shore resident, as well as author. And I know that you have a much longer title. You're welcome to share that with folks, but Lyle, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Well, it's all about the river, not about me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's better. Thought I'd do an agenda and we can take questions at the end, and I thought I'd cover the vital statistics of the river, its history, of course, that's the main point, and how it's been used over the years for traveling, to get inland from the ocean, for fishing, for marsh haying, and for shipbuilding. Those are some of the key activities for this river over the years. And then the towns involved. Sorry. And then the threats to it, I think the two big threats, and one that I really wasn't aware of before, was in 1870, there was a plan to change the river from a tidal river into when it's freshwater, dammed up, separated from the ocean. And that would allow development of meadowlands where I guess salt marshes are now. So we'll talk about that. And then the 1898 storm, which many of you have heard about, but that shortened the length of the river, and that was a major event that a lot of people talk about in this area. And then lessons from its survival. We're lucky to have it today, and I want to see what we can do going forward, what lessons we can take from the past. And this, then I'll take your questions. The cover of this book is created by Susanna Greening of Scituate, along with based on a photo here of the North River, taken by Gary Banks and Bill Richardson. Those of you who tuned in last week on the talk about the South River, there were some photographs there by Bill Richardson and Gary Banks. They're also from Scituate and they're friends of mine. We did a book together too, Scituate by Air, which covers some of this. But it's a kind of an iconic, really a summary of the book. Here's the river winding its way slowly, maybe towards the ocean. On the left is Third Cliff, which is actually where I live in Situate. On the right is Fourth Cliff in Marshfield. Here, I think, is Trounce Island. We'll talk about that for a second. On the left is probably Will's Island. And then two major things here, the railroad track that went across the North River starting about 1870, and then the highway that's there today on Route 338. So some brief vital statistics. Where it is, it's north of the South River, so that makes sense. Its name goes back to the early 1600s when the English settlers got to Plymouth and started colonizing this area. It has a name in the Native American language too, but we'll be talking about the North River here. And it's halfway between Boston and Plymouth, which means a harbor like that would be really valuable in case of a storm or something. If you're not too very close to either Boston or Plymouth, you can seek refuge there. The towns involved, and this map is from 1902. It shows it's from let's see, Atlas of Boundaries. It was surveyed. You can see all the survey lines all over. It was very scientifically done and kind of a neat map, but it shows the 6 towns that the river runs through: Hanson, Pembroke, Hanover, Norwell, Marshfield, and Situate. Anyone here from Hanson? Okay, well, that's probably the furthest away. So the river starts kind of down in this area. It goes like this and then up and over. I describe it as an upside down dipper, like the Big Dipper, except it's upside down. So, wiggles around a lot too. Bill Richardson says, don't use the word wiggle. It's not technical. The watershed associated with the North River is 59,000 acres. And I think that's larger than Walt Disney World in Florida, larger than metropolitan Boston, and almost the size of Martha's Vineyard. The length is 12 miles now. In this scene from 1902, the river went all the way down there and then exited to the ocean. And then it was 15 miles, but 3 miles of that got swallowed up by, the storm of 1898 came through and cut an opening right through there. And so these 3 miles became part of the South River. Actually, I think the South River is longer than the North River. Now, it kind of upsets me to think about that. It's not very wide, and it meanders a lot. It goes back and forth, wiggles around, and they used to say at some points when they were building ships out here, there was places they called no gains because basically, instead of going east, you were going west, and then you'd have to go north and then over. So that's the Wiggly River, and its slope is almost flat. In fact, I wonder how the water even gets from one place to the other. I compared this in the book. I compared it to Heartbreak Hill on Boston Marathon. It starts in Hopkinton and goes to the ocean. So it's kind of like this, and it's probably long. It's longer. It's 24 miles instead of 12 or 15. But that at least has Heartbreak Hill, and that slope is really high compared to this one. This has hardly any height to it. And then tidal, I wanted to talk about that. It's connected to the Massachusetts Bay Ocean. From here, you can get out to England if you've got the right boat, I guess. And it's tidal. I'll probably talk a little more detail about that, but the tidal means that it's affected by the tides. So that brings in salt water to this. And I was thinking, well, okay, yeah, maybe at the mouth there's a little bit of salt there. Well, not really. There's salt that goes all the way up to there. So it is somewhat salty up here, more salty down there. And it's, of course, home to some fish that we'll talk about in a second. Here's a nice picture looking at the Union Street Bridge. And this was called a fair river. I think that's a good description. Fair meaning, you know, beautiful, nice, lovely, navigable for boats, 10 miles, and hay grounds on both sides. This is called, these are words from the English settler William Vassall of 1643. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. You can see that actually this photo, I think, shows what he saw. Because on both sides of the river, there's these huge flat areas. Those are the salt marshes. And that was, they have salt marsh hay, which is important to the early settlers. So when he talks about hay grounds on both sides, he was looking at this as a, you know, as a comfortable place to settle down and to feed and to use the hay for feeding their animals that they came over. So not very long after Scituate was founded, before they had cows up here. I think it was 1620s that they had cows down in Plymouth. And speaking of animals, okay,
It may have jumped. It may have
I
jumped.
did jump, didn't I? Oh, okay. All right. So I'm currently writing about the shape of the shore, and this is a wonderful map. And the neat thing about it is the map maker had comments all around here about different places. And this is the first time that they really highlight Scituate and Cohasset. And he says they build a great many ships here and bring out at high water. The reason for that is, remember how shallow that there's very little slope. So you have to wait till the tides raise up. So you're not dragging these new built boats along the ground, along the bottom of the river. So at high water, you can bring those boats out. And this map is from 1733. So the towns of Cohasset, Scituate, Green Harbor, which is mislocated here because it's really the early name for Marshfield. That should be down here, and in the mouth of the North River. So that's kind of neat. So what goes in the river? Before the settlers, before 1733, there were fish. And I never would have thought about the American shad, except that the North and South River Watershed Association had one of these WaterWatch talks about 2 or 3 years ago. And they talked about the American shad. And so that it's in the North River. There's a great book I mentioned here called The Founding Fish by John McPhee. He's one of America's greatest writers, and really fun to read. And he calls it the founding fish because they were used in the Plymouth plantation got settled there, and they not only ate the fish, but they used them for fertilizing the corn to grow there. And they also appeared in the Revolution of American Revolution. They were basically the main source of food for our American soldiers. And I should mention that this American shad is the largest version of the herring, so it is a herring. And it swims around for 4 years in the ocean, about 12,000 miles. That's why John McPhee calls it the Olympic fish. And then it comes back to its spawning grounds, which in this case are way upriver in the North River, and other tributaries that go into the Atlantic Ocean. So that's the American shad. Some more tales about it in the book too. But what I wanted to mention is my neighbors said it's a great sport fish. It's the Connecticut state fish. Massachusetts got the cod, so Connecticut had to settle for the shad. And they do have some celebrations of the shad, and there's actually some celebrations of the herring along the North River too, primarily in what town is that?
Probably
Pembroke, yeah, Pembroke,
as well as Plymouth.
yeah. And I had fun talking about this, but it also raises the question: well, how do those fish get upstream and to their spawning grounds? Well, there's no dam on the North River itself, there are on all the tributaries. Well, most of the main tributaries. So we'll talk about that because they have some historical interest. Oops. Oh, I mentioned that this was the food for the American soldiers in the Revolution. They got bread and salt shad. The fish was as salt as fire, according to this guy, and dry bread without any kind of vegetables. So this guy, Joseph Plum Martin, who was a soldier, seemed to be involved in many of the battles of the American Revolution. And if you watch that show that show on American Revolution by Ken Burns. They quote him about 15 times. He's an interesting writer. You can find his book, his kind of a diary online. It's pretty interesting. But anyway, later on, he moved over to West Point and he said, well, we got our good old diet salt shad. And they got handed out to all the soldiers. Well, he had to go inside to the town hall to register or do something. He left his salt cod outside and he said by the time he came out, one of the cows was just finishing her meal on my shad. The last I saw of it was the tail of a fish sticking out of the side of her mouth. So that tells you something about the durability of our American soldiers. Okay, well, we talked about dams that prevent the herring from moving up the river and other fish. So here's a prime example, the Stockbridge Mill in Scituate, not far away from us here. And it's the oldest grist mill in America, 1650. It's still surviving. And it's also at the oldest dam, which was put in by 1640. And the dam is, well, kind of across the river is the old Oak and Bucket Pond, if you know that area. The dam is kind of along there, and then the water split into two parts. One part over there's a dam over there, and then the other part goes through this house, which is the grist mill, and then that was powering the mill, so it could turn a wheel and then grind the corn meal down to something that you could use. So this is an iconic building in many North River tributaries have these, and some still exist. And one example that actually still exists is the Clap Rubber Mill dam, which is right here. This is Hanover, and that's Pembroke. And what else can I say? This is a big pond, and then the Indian Head River starts here and goes there, and then it leads into the Indian Head Brook, and then that goes into the North River. So it's a tributary of the North River. This is called Ludden's Ford area, because back in the 1600s, a guy named Ludden helped carry the colonial governor across the ford here, because you could get across the river there. And he didn't want the governor to get wet, so he carried him on his back. And is a real person, and his name still applies there. This is called Ludden's Ford Park, and I think this is called Ludden's Ford Park too. But anyway, this is this map is from 1917. This shows in color. It's only in black and white in the book, but it shows in color all these buildings belonging to the rubber mill. They didn't make rubber here, they took rubber and recycled it, which sounds great, except that they release some toxic materials. So this area you have to be careful about, and don't take shad out of here, at least down here. Or take it and then release it. You can see how extensive that was. It was really industrial activity along the North River, probably a prime example.
So it's still polluted with those chemicals?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. You could ask Becky Malamet, who gave the talk last week. I want to thank them. She and Kezia did a great job last week on talked about the South River, and also touched on some of the North River.
Yeah, if I'm, and that's a great question, and if I'm correct, there's an advisory to not consume fish between the Indian Head and Route 3 bridge. So if there's an expert out there in Zoomland that wants to restate that in the Q&A, feel free. But I believe that's the sort of advisory there. Yeah. Because of mercury.
All about the water. Okay, so oops.
Lyle, I got a question.
Yeah.
So as a rubber mill, did they recycle rubber that came, it's obviously natural rubber come from the tropics?
No, they'll use old tires or whatever they.
No, but the original rubber came from the tropics. I used to be in the
Yeah.
rubber business.
Yeah.
Pollen, so I know about, quite a bit about pollen,
Oh,
polymer
great.
chemistry, but did they grind the rubber there? Was it like a whole grinding system and they reheated it and made rubber products probably? No,
Yeah, I think there's a shed here called the vulcanizing shed.
And that's
So they,
rubber, yeah.
yeah, but this is recycled rubber, so it's
Yeah.
not direct from Brazil or
Yeah,
wherever.
that's great to know they actually recycle back then.
Yeah,
Lyle, what was the rubber used? Like, what was it recycled into?
anything.
Okay.
I don't know specifically. It's a good question though. So I don't have all the answers. Okay, this is the site today. Well, photo taken in last March, almost a year ago. The white bench over here is on the Ludden Ford Hanover side. The black bench here is on the Pembroke side. You can see the buildings are all gone. So it looks it's very pretty, and it's actually one of the great places to go for a picnic or something, for just walking around too. There are actually picnic areas on both sides of the river, both towns. And it's one of the kind of the hidden gems of the South Shore, I would say. I took my son there. We drove past it. You know, you know where Broadway Street is? I don't know how local some of you are, but maybe a better way to describe it is it's near Hanover Four Corners. And it's right near, less than a mile away from Route 53. So the way I like to describe it is I'm not a surveyor, so I say, does anyone know where Previties is on 53? Raise your hand if you do. Whoa, okay, fellow fans of that place. Well, if you're going west past Previties and that road kind of curves to the right, go to the left, and then just a mile later is this park. It's just wonderful. So did I miss something? Okay, so another activity along the river was salt haying. That was gathering the salt marsh hay. And I should, there's a great book on it called Salt Marsh Haying by William Vinyl. And this fed the early colonial people. And they also used the hay from this for insulation in their houses and for thatch on the roof. So this was really great to have, especially when you get to this new country and there's no farms. Well, actually, there are a few little plots of farmland from the Native Americans, but none of the big farms that could feed their cattle and their sheep and pigs and so forth. So they needed this salt marsh hay, and that lasted, well into the 1800s. That activity. So I wanted to point out on this great photo. This is a pile of hay, of course. I think what they're doing is picking it up from the ground. They've already cut the hay, and then this guy throws it up to the guy on top. And the guy on top is building this until it makes kind of a round top. And if you do it just the right way, the rain will just fall off on the sides, and so it'll kind of preserve the hay. So what they do is they store it. They farm it in the fall and then store it over the winter. And in the winter, you could go out and get what you needed. You could also go over some of these brooks and streams that were there and take your horse and carriage over the stream because it was frozen then, so it'd be easier to get the hay at that time. And you can take as much as you want, bring it back to your barn and put it up in the barn. So here we have the hay is on top of these pilings, which they call staddles. And these would be sunk into the ground and would keep it away from the ground so that the salt marsh hay would not spoil. So again, it was pretty well preserved that way. Um, you had guys with really long pitchforks like that. You had a horse that would come out on the salt marsh, and that's a wagon back there. If you were taking the salt marsh hay back to the barn, you'd fill up the wagon and go back. Originally, it was oxen. Horses actually were about 10 times more expensive than oxen. So, and oxen were pretty strong, but after a while, like this is a later photo, you get to horses. And horses could also take you around town. So, oops. There we go. Okay. The salt marsh haying business had a lot of implements, and it's a great collection of them at the Cudworth Barn in Situate. How many know where that is? Okay, not too many. Well, if let's see, it's not far from the Lawson Park. It's another thing. The Old Gates School, it's across the street from that, or it's on the same grounds. The the auditorium or the gym where some people can play pickleball, it's right there. So anyway, it's open by the Situate Historical Society on certain days. I went in there and I got my son John, who's here. John, stand up, come on. I want you to see how tall he is, because I used him. He's a teacher in Situate. I want you to see how tall he is, because I used him as a measure to see how tall is this building. Because well, I'll come to that. Anyway, he's holding two pitchforks. One is the typical metal tine one that you see, and the other is made entirely out of wood. And I think it's like carved out of one piece of wood. In this next picture, you see this tall pole, and that's taller than John. And that you get two of those, and the guys out in the marsh would stick them underneath the pile of hay and then carry them that way. So these are hay poles, and there's at least two of them. There's at least two of them in that Cudworth barn. And then inside the barn is this ladder that goes way up. You see, this is the second level. That's where you would put the hay. There were like places for the cows down below. So it would be easy to get the hay and just get it down to the cows when it was time for them to get fed. But this ladder goes way up to the top. I don't see any reason for doing that. But what my hunch is, that was so tall that you were able to use it for that haystack that I showed you before, which is really tall. So anyway, that's the great ladder that's in the Cudworth barn. And then finally, these shoes, two pieces of wood that clamp together like that on the feet of either a cow or a horse. You need that if you're going out in the marsh, especially if it's not winter and not frozen, because otherwise they'd sink into the marsh. So these are called bog shoes. And it was incredibly tough for me to find a good photo of these on the web. And I actually found this live real ones at the Cudworth barn. So during Situate Heritage Days, or when the Cudworth barn's open, I'd suggest that you stop by there and take a look. When you got all that salt marsh hay to the edge of the marsh, then you had a problem because you had to transport it. But the solution was this boat called a gundalo, which was a very shallow boat that could handle the low tides on the North River. And you can see here, there's another great photo. There's a guy back here with maybe a pole, maybe he's steering. This guy in the back is maybe steering, and then he's got a pole. Basically, some of these like from north of Boston, Newburyport, they would have sails. but the original versions were just like that, and you just kind of stick your pole in the ground and push the boat along with your load of hay. So once you got in the North River, then you could take it up, either upstream to people that need it up that way, or you could go further around. And it was a great way to get around. Shipbuilding, I mentioned, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because it's covered well by other books. But this is a great photo from the Norwell Historical Society. There's several versions of this. I like this one because these women are coming down to see this big boat. It's not one of the biggest, but it was a decent sized boat built on the North River, called the Helen Foster. And there's 3 or 4 women here with their hats and maybe umbrellas or parasols to view this. I think about a quarter of the town of Norwell turned out for this event. This is the last major ship launch in the town. It's at the end of what's the name of that road? Chittenden Road. Thank you. Yeah, great one. It's at the end of Chittenden Road. It doesn't look like this today, but it's very pretty, and it's a great view of the banks on the other side of the river. You can see some of them in this photo. And there's also a boat launch area there, which is accessible for people from Norwell, I think. And you can see all the people out here. The neat thing about this photo is it was owned by a descendant by the family, the Merritt family, the boat builder. And it had on the back of it was written the names of some of these people, like the captain of the boat. It said he's the guy gazing off into the distance in the front of the boat there. So there's a lot of detail that you don't ordinarily get with some of these old photos. Canals are also built. How are we doing on time?
We're doing great, about another half hour, 30 minutes, something like that.
Canals were proposed along the North River. Here's a great image, a photo from 1829. And as you see in the book, the idea of a canal leading from the North River, which is here, up to the Scituate Harbor, seemed to make a lot of sense for a long time. First of all, you could avoid, if you built a ship and you had to go down here and then you have to go out in the ocean and then all the way up here to get to a harbor, that was a lot of extra mileage. The other thing was it's open ocean, so if you could avoid that, great. So canals were proposed or even thought about as early 1800s. There's references to that in the Scituate town records when they were authorizing a dam to be built in the harbor. They said you can build a dam, but you got to reserve enough room there for a canal to come in. So that's early 1800s. In 1825, the Erie Canal was completed. That was a massive project, and it was a huge success, both for shipment of goods and as a financial success. It made back its money right away. Didn't take 20 years to recoup its investment. And so in 1829, this map was prepared. In 1831, the proposal for that came to Congress, and Daniel Webster was our senator at the time, and John Quincy Adams was our representative. Our meaning many of the South Shore towns, from Quincy on down to Marshfield. And John kept a great diary. It's available online from the Mass Historical Society. He's really a good writer, good recorder of what happened at these events. And so he was approached by people from Scituate, probably to put in this canal. But there was 2 other alternatives. One is put a cut through here, which is what the storm of 1898 took care of. The other was to dredge it down here, because by this time the silt was building up and it was started to make it very difficult for boats to get through here. And then the whole thing came up again in 1853. Only this time, let's see if I've got any more on that. Yeah, well, Here's a plan of 1852. And I've highlighted this in red here, but if you look at the original copy of the map on the web, you can see faint lines that go straight from the North River. Remember, north is this way. So, okay, straight from the North River, almost to Situate Harbor. They didn't have to reach all the way because there are some little streams there that could connect into the harbor. So this was proposed in 1852 and seriously investigated by the Army Corps of Engineers.
That goes right behind Peggotty Beach, looks like.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Peggotty Beach would be here.
Right where the red line ends, I think it's Peggotty Beach.
Yes, this is what they call bluff number 1, bluff number 2, bluff number 3, meaning first cliff, second cliff, third cliff. This was obviously written by somebody from out of town, but anyway, it's a pretty good description, but there's other Coast Survey, US Coast Survey maps from around this time. The problem was let me go back one. You had the Situate people were talking to John Quincy Adams, the Marshfield people were talking to Webster and not telling Quincy Adams about it. So one was going to the House, the other was Senate. And then there were 3 different proposals and nobody could agree on anything. So basically that proposal just died. Okay, the next big exciting thing was the proposal to build dams. And I talked about this before. Remember the upside down dipper? They were going to build a dam here. And then part of not a major feature of this was to build another dam over here, which is near the old Washington Street Bridge. And the dam here is, and I'm going to give you another food-oriented surveying tip. Everybody know where the Bridgeway Inn is in Marshfield? Okay, then this is right where the Bridgeway Inn is. Pretty close. And right where that bridge is now today, but that bridge, of course, was not there then. So they were going to put a dam in right there. And as I said, they were going to change this from salt marshes to fresh meadows. They could grow corn and tomatoes and everything that would be getting the farmers more money in the market. And it had to have its plan was really supported by some of the leading hydrographers, the guys who studied the oceans, the water levels, and the effect on land. These were some of the leading guys in America, and they were all headquartered in basically in Boston, part of MIT, which had just been founded. So they were very curious about what was going on in Europe because Europe was putting dams in to do this kind of reclamation work, especially in like Holland. You've heard about the dikes and the dams there. Well, they wanted to do that in America. This was a good kind of an experimental place to do it. Let's see. One other thing, it was not only 2 dams there, but they would have to put in seawalls here because there are some low spots, in the beach between Third Cliff and Fourth Cliff. There's one, and I'll show you a picture of it later, but that's very low. There's some other low spots. You want to keep the ocean out, all that salt water you want to keep out. And then there was another risk that they knew about from the storm of 1851. The water came in from Situate Harbor and then came down this way across what is now Situate Country Club and entered the North River there. And so they wanted to build that, the driftway. They wanted to build the driftway up to keep the water out. So this was well thought through. It was okayed by the Massachusetts Board of Harbor Commissioners, and the Massachusetts legislature approved it. They actually passed a law that said you can do it. The problem was for the people who would have to do this is if you invested this money, you also had to guarantee there wouldn't be any problems with the state, and you either had to file a bond or some kind of insurance, and your property was at risk. So if you couldn't afford, if the bond failed, or if you couldn't afford to come up with this money, the state or the town could seize your property. So there was a risk involved in going through with this plan and putting up the financial assurances, even if you didn't have to come up with the cash for it. So anyway, here's a plan from Mitchell, I guess. The lower dam was. Lower dam. Okay. Oh, okay. There's two points I want to make. This is where, let's say, the Bridgeway Inn is, or the C Street Bridge is. That's the sea level there. That's probably high water and low water, and then the bottom of the channel. And then over here is the ocean. This is Hummerock. Here's the ocean, and if you look real close, there's about a 20-inch difference between the two. As it turns out, later they calculated this and made measurements, and indeed this ocean was 20 inches higher than the water. So we keep that in mind for a second. We'll come back to that. I talked about the leading hydrographers. So a guy named Herschel came in as an engineer, a budding young engineer, and gave a detailed report. And I found a copy of it, a photocopy of his handwritten report at the Norwell Historical Society. It was a great find, I thought. Actually, a lot of it got published in the newspaper, but it was nothing like finding a copy of the real thing. And he was very detailed, like 7 pages long. He said, we're reclaiming the marshes, reclaiming it from, I think that's a funny word to use, but reclaiming it from the ocean, I think is the idea. So instead of water, it's now going to be land. That's how I would put it. But it's great engineering details. He said the only thing that you have to worry, the owners have to worry about, is whether it's a viable business plan. And he says if your property is now valued at $12 an acre for your salt marshes, if you can, by making this more productive, raise that to $20 an acre, then it makes economic sense. And leading landowners supported this. If you see this poster called everybody to a meeting in the center of Norwell to discuss this project in 1873. And there was like 11 guys who signed this. Parker Welch was one of them. Parker was on Third Cliff, one of the largest landowners in Scituate, and he was there at his father's farm, Michael Welch. He would go on after this to found the Welch Company in Scituate, along with his son, George Welch. And that actually remnants of that company is still around in Scituate today, but that was a big business, one of the biggest, probably the biggest business in Scituate for maybe 100 years. So he was in support of that. So it wasn't a Scituate versus Marshfield thing. This was all agriculture guys now. This was not shipbuilders anymore. As I thought last night, that ship had sailed. So they had this public meeting, the plan didn't happen. I found really no discussion of that. But it turns out that 1873 was a bad year for investments. There was the panic of 1873 and 1874 decimated the American economy. So this is probably not a good time to start investing. Probably time to hunker down. So here's a great photo, courtesy of Harvard, of the beach between North River and the beach between Third Cliff and Fourth Cliff. Oops, sorry, we're losing our hull.
No, you're good. That was okay.
There's a few rare photos of this. You've probably seen them before, but this astonished me. I've never seen this before. This is in the book, but here you're standing on Fourth Cliff, at the tip, looking over towards Third Cliff. And actually, in detail, you can see some of these photos taken in before the 1898 storm. You can see some houses and buildings up there. I could probably identify it if I spent enough time at it. One thing to point out is that right about there, on the Situate side is, near Third Cliff, at the bottom of the cliff is the Mass Humane Society Life Saving Station. So if mariners got stuck out here or they got shipwrecked, they could go to the hut of refuge and get warmed up and get dried off. And I think there might have been boats there that could go out and rescue these shipwrecked sailors. So that's before, and then I have an after photo. And this one, the beach is gone. This is from Third Cliff looking over towards Fourth Cliff. And this is a farmer's yard with cows grazing over there. And I don't see much of a fence, so I hope none of those cows fell over the cliff. But you can see it's pretty steep. And this was the road. You can see down here, this area that goes along there. That was actually a road. They called it a highway. They called a lot of things highways. And this is the road that led and went all the way over to Fourth Cliff. So you could actually go, that was a good way to get over to Fourth Cliff at the time. This is from a postcard. There's several like it, but this is the one I like the best. Now, move ahead to 1915. That project did not happen. And the storm came through. But in 1915, there was more talk about improving the river. And now that I'm such an environmentalist, I always wonder when they talk about improving the river or reclaiming the river. But this is a wonderful map. And I have a friend of mine who told me about it and then went to Massachusetts archives and photographed it. So this is a copy of the photo that he got. Now this map was done in 1915 by, it's either Army Corps of Engineers or people associated with them for the Massachusetts Board of Harbor Commissioners. And they did a super job. It's a really fine detail. The problem was the Massachusetts archives, first of all, this map is it's about ready to fall apart. You touch it, it could fall in a million pieces. So my friend knows how to handle that kind of situation and get a good photo out of it. The other problem is there are 7 sheets, 1, 3, 5, and 7 are the only ones at the Massachusetts archives. So I put out a call. If anyone know if you have sheets 2, 4, and 6, let me know. Well, it turns out about a month ago, I found out that that Norwell Historical Society has copies of the whole set, sheets 1 through 7. Now, they're not the original like this one, but they are kind of like blueprint copies. And they have all the fine detail, and they're this big, they're like 36 inches wide. And so I've asked the society if they would have those copied, which I think can be done pretty easily commercially. And then I'll put it out on my website. So we'll have, actually now you can download this from my website. What I like about it, let's take a closer look at it. First of all, this is Third Cliff. This is the Spit. This is Fourth Cliff. That's Trowance Island. It's labeled that way. Let's see. Oh, the railroad. The railroad crosses the river right there. What else? This is the Herring River that comes in from the old Oak and Bucket Pond. And, this all shows, this is salt marsh. That's the way map makers indicate that. And then you see all these lines like that, going like that, and they march right into there. I call it a caterpillar with a hairy, what do you call it? Hairy feelers out there. Those are soundings. And each one of these, you can see like here, even this short one, there's about 10 soundings that they're measuring the depth to the bottom of the river. They said, we know a lot of work had been done before by engineers, but nobody had ever done soundings up the river. So they covered the whole river from the mouth of the river all the way up to, actually they went beyond it. They went up to where the Indian Head River is and up to where the dam is at the Levin's Ford. So they overachieved anyway. So it's a great map. Has a lot of detail and it's helpful today if you want to reconstruct what our salt marshes are. This kind of data is really helpful.
Wow, did they sound at low tide, mean low or mean high, or because it's a tidal estuary?
Yeah,
Does it matter? I mean, it does matter,
I'm not sure that,
but it doesn't say on the map.
yeah,
Probably mean low just to be
Yeah.
safe, so any ship, any boat could go in there at any time and not.
well, I don't know, you don't want the guys doing the survey, you don't want them to run aground.
Right, so mean low,
So mean high
but then
is
it's
my
low
guess.
tide.
It's just a guess. You could do more research on this and,
Yeah,
you know, I am actually getting into the process of what surveying is for my next book. But I can't answer that. I can't answer that question right now, but there is a difference between mean low and mean high tide. And,
Lyle,
yeah,
with that railroad bridge, is that Damon's Point?
yes,
That's okay. It looks like structures there or something.
yeah, still there.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
So here's 1914. Trowance Island. I've got these great photos from a guy whose grandfather lived here at Trowance Island and it was a great photographer and outdoors person. So he's got copies of his relatives here, 2 kids going clamming. We talked about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at that. They don't even have a clamming rate.
I wonder if they got a
They
license.
just dig down. Well, actually, you're required to have a license back then. Part of my book, I think, talks about somebody who got caught. The grandfather's wife is right there is right there rowing this boat. And this is along what is now the South River. In the background is the Mass Humane, not the Mass Humane Society, but the other one, the Coast Guard, what's now the Coast Guard. What was it after the mess? Anyway, the other thing that morphed into the Coast Guard. Their plant was there, but that was gone 3 years later. So this is a good historical photo of what it looked like back then. But you know, people are boating and clamming and hunting along the mouth of the North River. So anyway, what the storm of 1898 left behind was these ghost trees, and I'm sure you've read about those before. I think Kezia had an article about those in one of the newsletters from the North and South River Watershed Association. But this photo is taken 1911, again from Harvard. Great collection of photos, and they're called ghost trees because, like, these are all bare; they're dead, as opposed to these, which are on higher ground. And you can tell at the bottom part here, all these trees are white. So it's a great photo, revealing photo of this. And I tried to locate this. I'm pretty sure this, a couple other things. There's a brook that goes along here. It's one of those brooks that goes in and out. It's a good way to describe it.
But are they dead because 13 years earlier, the storm?
Yeah,
Did that?
Yeah. yeah.
So.
And there's still ghost trees out there today. I don't know if they're the same ones or if they're a result of,
Other high tides.
higher tides. And it's either, it could be the salt or it could be just the rise. Remember the 20 inches?
Yeah.
Well, 1898, all of a sudden, these guys were used to something that was 20 inches lower. Now all of a sudden, they've got 20 inches extra water. So that had a big effect.
Yeah, Lyle, there's I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but it looks like I can't quite tell what types of trees these are. Some of these kind of look like deciduous trees, which means that just the inundation
Yeah.
of water in general probably would have killed these. But you can go to like Couch Beach and look across towards towards Norwell and see Atlantic white cedar trees dead that would have been because of the salinity, the increase in salinity due to the shortening of the North River.
Mhm.
So that salt water was what came in there. And those trees would have been wetland
Mhm.
tolerant, but that salinity is what did it. So a little bit of both
Right.
Yeah,
could have happened, but you can still see those cedar because the cedar is very hydrophobic bark or hydrophobic wood, so it doesn't rot right away. So you can still go out there and see them to this day if you look carefully.
yeah.
Yeah,
See, they learn a lot about our current situation from these old photos.
so cool.
So this is probably a scene you could see from, with these canal channels going through here. And then there's a ditch. If you're looking close, there's a ditch right there. That's one of those built into the, that were dug. I've covered it in another book called Ditching the Marshes. But you see a lot of these like parallel lines in the marsh. And so I was trying to locate where this was. First of all, I tried walking out here. I crossed over the North River into Marshfield, parked over there, and then started walking out in the marsh. I was heading out towards a little island, and I got to the railroad line, and I walked down the railroad line. Then I took a left into the marsh, and it was at low tide, mean low. It was not. It was better than mean low tide, I thought. And then so I was walking over towards this island called Bear Island. And I started sinking into the mud. So I figured I better turn around and go home. So I didn't make it all to the island that I wanted. But I could tell from this photo that if you look at the angle, there's this ridge up here and there's these houses. This is 1911. Well, that's when George Welch was building all these houses in Third Cliff, Rivermore, the Rivermore development area, which is where I live now. And I covered that in another book called On a Cliff. You have one there? Oh, yeah. I'll put in a little ad. So this has, on the back is a photo of the mouth of the North River, the spit. That's also from Bill Richardson and Gary Banks. So, thank you. So, I could probably make out who owns these houses because I'm so immersed in the history of this area, but maybe your house is in there. But if you look at the right angle, I think this is pretty clearly, this is Bear Island. Okay, how we're doing that? Oh, all right. So recently I said how you can learn a lot about our current environment from these old historic photos and historic data, like that map, that 1915 map that had all the soundings on it. Well, a couple of years ago, UMass Amherst did a study on how did the inlet switch, the switch from 3 miles south to the storm blowing through here, how did that affect the marshes and the estuarine channels? Estuarine means river, something like river.
Where the river meets the sea.
Yes, yeah, where it meets rivers that meet the sea. So here is a great photo again by Bill Richardson and Gary Banks. That's Fourth Cliff. Crowns Island is here, I think. Yeah. And South River comes in here and meets the North River and then goes out. So they said, well, that big storm of 1898, what did that do to things? And I shared some research with them. I hadn't finalized on the 20-inch number, but they did a lot of research out there. And a guy named Brian Yellen from UMass Amherst was very helpful, and one of his other colleagues, John Woodruff, has also been doing research on that too. So anyway, what the research that they did found that the sediment from the ocean that got brought in by waves and tides, that actually helped the marsh survive and recover from that storm of 1898 and adapt to it. Maybe different kinds of salt marsh hay would grow there than there were before. But you can see in that photo I showed early on, it's come back to life. It's almost like it was in 1643, perhaps. But I have no photos from that time. They said that the sediment coming in from the ocean is depositing 3 times faster than sea level rise. And of course, now people are concerned about the rising sea levels, what that's going to do for our shorelines and for our communities that live along the shore. So that's a helpful study because they said, it's possible to recover. And if you do, these salt marshes act as a buffer between the ocean and the land. So it's really helpful going forward. The problem is in the last 100 years, America's destroyed almost all of its salt marshes. So we're very lucky to have these left. And the reason I said that is because of this 2024 study by the NSRWA. It's a estuarine research places that talk about, they do river research about rivers that are next to the ocean. One is in down in the Cape, but there's about 30 of them around the country. The study pulsed them all. They did a lot of scientific research on where were these coastal wetlands in the past, where are they now, where could we grow them in the future? Really fundamental questions, and it was just great research. And what I liked about it is they not only looked at LiDAR radar data from the height of the ground, satellite images and stuff like that. They also used historical data, especially those coast survey maps from 1825 on. Not all of them were helpful for their study, but they were able to take them and convert them, digitize them, but then you have to do other things about adapting those because they were using different kind of frames of reference for those old surveys in the 1820s. But a lot of them could be converted into today information that's useful today. And what they found was, I think there's a lot more left of those surviving salt marshes than we give credit for. Okay, so the Alex Mansfield from North and South River Watershed Association was involved in this 2015, last year's marsh prioritization study, which covered marshes from, I think, from Kingston up to, gosh, I don't know, Quincy maybe, all along the shore here. They were trying to say, well, which marshes have been too damaged maybe to recover? Which ones can we do something about? Which ones can we restore? And how can we do that? So it's an excellent study. I think I've got a reference to it on my website. And let's see, 18, yeah, well, I'll skip that. This continuing scientific study, I just double checked a few days ago about the funding for NSRWA, current funding this year, next year. It looks like they have not been slashed. Their funding has not been slashed like so many other scientific endeavors of the federal government. So they might be okay. I wish them luck. So there's hope for our future. I think what these studies are saying, there's hope for our future. There's some ideas on how we can preserve these salt marshes, preserve our wonderful North River and other rivers. So this is more reflections about the river. It's very scenic. I can see it from my house and I really enjoy looking at it every day. It's enjoyable. And John Stilgo, a historian who was a professor at Harvard and lives in Norwell, said, cherish its flow. I think cherish is the right word. It's historic. It's with timely lessons for us today. It's a survivor of the industry that was built along the river, the 1870 plan, which didn't happen, and the 1898 storm, which completely changed the shape of the river. And then it's got important large salt marsh. When that NSRWA study that I mentioned, they told you how big those marshes were. And I said, well, I wonder how big our marsh is. And wouldn't you know, well, I think ours is like bigger than any of them. And it's not the biggest in Massachusetts. That would be the marshes north of Boston, going into Maine and New Hampshire. Those are huge, but ours are, I would say, third largest contiguous salt marshes in Massachusetts. So this is quite a treasure that we have here. And it's an environmental landmark. Of course, don't think I ever mentioned, but it's designated by the state as as a scenic river. It's the only one, right?
Mhm.
The only scenic river in Massachusetts. And I would say landmark, except it's, you could call it a marsh mark or maybe a river mark or something like that. I don't know the right terminology for it, but this whole area, I guess, the whole watershed is the right word.
Mhm.
This whole watershed is a landmark. It's great. Okay, so the question is future. What do we do about it? And there's some books that you can do for further reading. Alongshore by John Stilgoe, who I mentioned. It's an older book, but it's really wonderful, and it takes place. A lot of his scenes are from around here because he's from Norwell, and he goes up and down the North River and its tributaries. Annie Proulx came out a few years ago with a book called Fen, Bog, and Swamp, which really touches on a lot of these current ecological issues. And then one that came out last year, Is a River Alive? Is a River Alive? By Robert McFarland. McFarland's another one of these wonderful writers. I think you really enjoy reading. It's almost at the edge of poetry, but it's very explanatory about rivers around the world, from Brazil to India. And I want to thank a lot of people here, especially North and South River Watershed Association, Steve, Brian, Alex and Kezia, and my contributors to the book. Thanks, John, for giving me a ride over here today. The book's available on Amazon. There's some copies for sale out here. It's also available at Buttonwood Books in Cohasset, in the same block. It's just over the line from Scituate. It's the same block as the grocery store there. And check out my website. I've got some of these you call business cards here and also in the front, that's got my website address on it. If you go there, there's all kinds of information that you can download a copy of that 1915 map, but only sheet one, I think. Maybe I put up the other sheets 3, 5, and 7. And a lot of other information. It's all free for you to use. So with that, I want to thank you for coming out on a snowy night. Thank you for supporting this, and I'd be happy to take questions.
What's the history, if you know, of Fourth Cliff being taken over by the military?
Yeah.
You know, in the submarine tower and this one in Green Harbor.
Mhm.
I mean, presumably that was done the late 30s or
Yeah.
40s or something.
Yeah, late 30s. It's interesting to see the old USGS maps of that time. And I think towards the end of the 30s, you can see the little things creeping up there. And I don't think they want to tell the Germans about this stuff. So you might not be able to see all the detail. But yeah, that started in the late 30s and it was built. But now there's other people who've written about this in much better detail.
Yeah.
But the guns that they put up there were the largest available. Those are the ones that they're six. They call them 6-inch guns. So I guess that's the size of the opening. Those are the guns they put on the destroyers in World War II. And so they were able to shoot out at any ships, submarines, whatever that were roaming around here. But it was part of a network too. They were tied in with say Squantum and up on the North Shore, so they could kind of triangulate on ships and submarines that were coming in. And it sounds kind of like science fiction in a way, but it was a real scare because back at I think 1941 or 42, German submarine landed on Long Island, and some of the Germans came ashore and started asking around. And the guy who I have to give a credit to the local guy who was there. He says, "Oh well, I'll tell you about it, but just wait a minute." So he went and told the authorities, and they arrested these guys. I don't remember if they got the submarine or not, but that scared everybody on the East Coast.
There was another one in Maine, I think,
Yeah.
foundered and the soldiers came ashore.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Those are U-boats, I believe.
Yeah.
German.
Yeah, U-boats would have, yeah.
Because in 1918, there was a shelling off the Cape Cod of a German U-boat was shelling a tugboat and a couple of barges.
Oh,
And there was a plane sent out from Chatham Airport with supposedly bombs. We're gonna bomb this U-boat, which had surfaced. And the bombs were all duds. So the pilot was really angry and he threw a monkey wrench down and it bounced off the deck of the U-boat and the captain said, let's go, we're out of here. So they submerged, they were gone back. They heard about this 10 years later on a German ship across the country. Somebody was talking to somebody and said, oh, it was on that U-boat, some crazy pilot. This thing would be. I have a question about the demise of shipbuilding on the North River.
yeah,
My understanding, please correct me or clarify, it was not only the river was silting up, especially at the mouth where
Yeah.
the South River is now.
Yeah.
South of, along Hummerock, but also steel ships were being built at that time. They were using steel instead of wood, and the whole, steamships and all that were coming into vogue, and the wooden ships were on the way out. Is
Well,
that correct?
yes, both of those are true. The shipbuilding on the North River was always fragile because it's on a small river and because of the shoals that were building up below. And if you look at the 1852 map, which I showed, but also is in my book, the surveyor said not navigable below this point, which is about where the Bridgeway Inn is. Not navigable but below this point, except for sloops, which are these small vessels. So it was really tough towards the end of the shipbuilding era, which extended probably in the 1850s. They had to haul some of these boats over land to get around. They get teams of animals on the sides of the rivers to kind of pull them along. And that was even before they added the masts and the riggings and all that kind of stuff, which were down at Rogers Wharf. So yeah, that was a problem. And what was the other
Well,
concern?
the steamship.
Steamships, yeah, they were starting with steamships. I'm not sure that was a big, that they were focused on the steamliners and other things.
Right, yeah.
But the big thing was competition. In the just before 1850, East Boston started becoming a real center for shipbuilding. They had a nice big harbor, had nice access to the sea, and they had a lot of nice shipbuilders who came up from Duxbury and Scituate and so forth and plied their ways up in East Boston. And that's where a lot of ships were built there. A lot of the what they call the clipper ships, the famous clipper ships that sailed faster than anyone else. They could get to Japan, get the fresh tea, or China, and then get the fresh tea, and then get back in time for them to sell in a high market back in the United States or in America. I mean, or in the UK. So yeah, market forces did it in as well.
So with the canal, the idea of a canal was kind of the same time as the South River was silting up and they went across the Scituate Harbor, right?
Canal's idea started in the early 1800s, if not sooner. Actually, the 1794 map has some indication of that, up to about 1854 when it kind of died.
Yeah, they saw the writing on the wall that
Yeah,
this was not the viable river.
yeah, I would say the silting problem was becoming noticeable in the 1840s until, early 1850s. Yeah, well, I forgot to mention, that there were three, well, I did say that the three options was the canal, the cut between third and fourth cliff, and the other was to dredge the silt out of those channels. Yeah. Other questions? Okay,
There was, in any of your research, did you come across a name that the natives would give the North River at all?
yeah, I think it was, it's in my book, but I think it's Missauga.
Okay.
It's an Algonquin word. I
Okay,
think it means big river, or mouth of a big river,
interesting. Okay,
or it may be Massasaugat, Tucket.
okay.
So it's a long word. Yeah.
This
Okay.
is so fascinating, Lyle. I mean, I think you could do a presentation about so many of these topics, including like the ditching and the
Yeah.
haying. And so I really appreciate you condensing all this fascinating stuff into a hours long presentation. So thank you so much for your time today. It was just really, really cool. Um, Thanks everyone for tuning in. You had about 80 folks that tuned in online too, which is a really great turnout. So, so kudos for bringing the crowd. When we have a blending of history and nature, it's a really cool mix. And all of this is just great to raise awareness about what this river has gone through, how important it is to us, to the environment, and then how important it is for the future, and that we want it to stay healthy and be available to all of us to paddle, to fish, to swim in, and to enjoy and to love. So thanks, Lyle, for this. I mean, it's just really cool. Um, As always, just a big shout out to our sponsors, Clean Harbors and the Massachusetts Cultural Councils of Hingham, Marshfield, Situate, Pembroke, Rockland, and Norwell. Thank you for your support. Tune in next week for February 4th, Wednesday, Riding the Rising Tide, Hull's Plan for a Changing Coast. And so the rising seas are reshaping our shores. Hull is diving in with creativity and collaboration. Join us as we explore how Massachusetts communities are preparing for coastal change and how in the future, through a combination of nature-based design, home elevation, innovative wetland restoration. So the town staff are going to share their approach and lessons learned from a multi-year planning process in the town of Hull, as well as all along our South Shore communities. So that's that. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. Thanks all of you for tuning in here at Mass Audubon Sanctuary. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having us, hosting us once again.
Thank you for coming.
We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you guys again next week. And I'm sure Lyle's here for any last minute questions that come in. So thanks everyone for tuning in online. And Brian Taylor with the North-South Rivers Watershed. We are signing off. Have a good night, everybody.
That was good. Good.